Hello, everyone. It's Anthony Bandiero here, attorney and senior legal instructor for Blue to Gold Law Enforcement Training, bringing you to the roadside chat. All right. So this question comes from an officer, and basically the question is, are there any problems when speaking with a non-Mirandized prisoners who are in the hospital but are not free to leave when they initiate the conversation? This is actually a pretty good scenario here. So, context for the question. The officer says, I work off duty in uniform, but off duty in the sense of overtime, and sometimes guarding prisoners who are wanted for serious crimes. But they are in a hospital because they were shot during their arrest, just as an example, right? Shot, have a heart attack, whatever. I go to watch my Netflix, right? Because he's just in the room. The person's chained to the bed, and but they usually start chatting me up and often reveal details about their offense or lock themselves into a story that detectives would want to know. I feel they start by prodding me for info. That's why they're doing it. They're looking like, what does this cop know about my situation? But they often, in the meantime, are revealing a ton about their case. They're giving, stories about where they were and where they maybe were not. And, this is something that maybe the prosecution, the detectives are going to want to know, for their case, right? Maybe it gives an alibi and not an alibi. Maybe the person later tries to use an alibi, but we can kind of prove that was false because what they said in the hospital room. The officer then also is running their body cam to kind of record this, but the officer is also doing things like minimal encouragements. Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay, that's pretty crazy. That type of stuff. Now, usually the cop says they have not been officially arrested, charged, but they're also not free to leave. They are in restraints. Once their medical concerns have been addressed, they're going to be booked in. Okay, and the officer and also thanks me for the channel and says that this is really helpful, which is why I do these and so forth. All right, so let's lay some ground rules here. When does Miranda apply? Miranda applies under 3 conditions. Number 1, arrest-like custody. Arrest-like custody is either when A, they've been formally arrested, or B, there exists a restraint on freedom that is the same level, essentially, as a formal arrest, right? So let's look at here. This person has not been charged formally, but undoubtedly, for Miranda purposes, they've been formally arrested, or there's an existence of restraints that's consummate with a formal arrest. So we have Miranda-type custody in this situation, without a doubt. Okay, there's a police officer in the room. They're handcuffed. They ain't going anywhere. Okay, that's not their home. They are definitely under arrest. The second factor is interrogation. Interrogation is when the officer asks something or does something that is foreseeable that will cause a person that will elicit an incriminating response, right? Asks something or does something that foreseeably elicits an incriminating response, right? That actually could likely going to say something that's going to incriminate them. And the last factor is a known officer, meaning this person realizes that person sitting in the chair watching Netflix is a police officer, not an undercover agent, in the jail cell, or police officers could, put a patient in the next room, the next bed, and that patient is actually a cop, and that patient asks questions that could be incriminating. As long as the suspect does not know that patient is an undercover cop or an agent of police, then there's no violation under Miranda. Okay, so we certainly have the 3 factors. The next factor is, we certainly have arrest-like custody and a known officer. I guess the key question is the, oh, really? Uh-huh. Are those questions that are going to elicit an incriminating response? I think the answer is no. I think context matters. But if the cop is really just acknowledging the person and saying, oh, wow, well, that's pretty crazy, then that's really not a question to elicit an incriminating response. However, if the officer says, tell me more about that. Oh, man, so you were running for your life when you're shooting for that, shooting at that person? That could incriminate that person. And so, therefore, Miranda rules would apply. Now, Another thing that you got to know is that, if we're on the edge here, we're not really sure, and maybe later the court finds out that he should have been Mirandized. The oh really, the oh really was it wasn't a statement likely to elicit a criminal response. Just realize that, strictly speaking, doing this in the hospital it does not violate anybody's rights. I mean, even strictly speaking, even if the cop did ask, without a doubt, hey, did you do it? Did you shoot that person? And the person says yes. Obviously, that violates Miranda, strictly speaking, but it's not a constitutional violation unless the prosecution seeks to introduce that incriminating statement in the case in chief. The case in chief is the people's burden to prove the crime, right? So we can't use that statement in the case in chief. We can't use it as part of our evidence. However, if the suspect says, well, I never shot that person, right? Gets on the stand, for example, says, I never shot that person. The state is allowed to use that unmirandized statement as a form of impeachment. And basically goes like this. Mr. Jones, you're saying now that you never shot the suspect. But in the hospital room, you told the officer that you did shoot the suspect in self-defense, right? Something like that. And that is basically impeachment evidence. Even though it would have violated Miranda, it doesn't violate the rules of evidence here. So going back to our context of the question, be very careful, right? You are a police officer. Obviously, you're there in an official capacity. If you ask the person that's likely to elicit a criminal response, you should Mirandize them, right? Despite the fact that it may not be a constitutional violation, yet we want to, as a professional law enforcement officer, we want to use all their statements in court in the case in chief. We don't want to have to play these games about only for using these statements for impeachment or something like that. We want to bring it forward and so forth. All right. I think that helps. I hope this has helped you get it right every single time. Until next time, my friends, you stay safe.